In this video, I'm going to be talking about the prioress. Now, the prioress was a member of the clergy, and according to the footnotes in your version of the Canterbury Tales, it says that a prioress is a nun ranking just below the head of a convent. Okay, so she was a pretty high-ranking nun. Now, while we read this section of the prioress and then later clergy members as well in the prologue, it's important to remember the time period in which Chaucer lived. Okay, during this time, there was a lot of corruption in the church, and this goes back to the Great Schism. During the time of the Great Schism, okay, there were two popes, and at one point even three people all claiming to be the real pope. So you have these factions fighting against one another, each saying that their pope was the real pope. So there was a lot of conflict in the church during this time. There was also a lot of corruption in the church during this time. This corruption was widespread. It ran rampant in all orders of the church. Okay, and Chaucer is especially hard on members of the clergy, okay, because of this corruption. He did not like hypocrisy, and we're going to see that play out in the members of the clergy that he decides to include in his text. So, reading the part of the prioress. There was also a nun, a prioress, her way of smiling very simple and coy. Her greatest oath was only, "By St. Loy," and she was known as Madame Eglantine. As a side note here, whenever Chaucer gives us a real name or a name for a pilgrim instead of just their job title, that means he's basing them off of someone that he knew. Okay, so the prioress is based off of a real person. And well she sang at service, with a fine intoning through her nose, as was most seemly, and she spoke daintily in French extremely. After the school of Stratford out Bow, French in the Paris style she did not know. This prioress is attempting to speak French. Now, during Chaucer's time, remember, the nobility were the ones speaking French. Why is the prioress trying to act like she is a member of the nobility? Could she formerly have been a member of the nobility before joining a convent? Maybe, but it seems like she's not speaking French very well. So it seems more likely that she is attempting to put on airs, attempting to seem more lofty than she is. If you're a member of the church, okay, if you're a nun, right, you're the bride of Christ, you've given up all worldly possessions, you've dedicated your life to the church. Why are you trying to seem like a fine lady of the court? At meat her manners were well taught withal. No morsel from her lips did she let fall, nor dipped her fingers in the sauce too deep, but she could carry a morsel up and keep the smallest drop from falling on her breast. For courtliness she had a special zest, and she would wipe her upper lip so clean that not a trace of grease was to be seen upon the cup where she had drunk. To eat she reached a hand sedately for the meat. She certainly was very entertaining, pleasant and friendly in her ways, and straining to counterfeit a courtly kind of grace, a stately bearing fitting to her place, and to seem dignified in all her dealings. Okay, so he's talking here about her imitating these manners, okay, these table manners that ladies would have, right? Having these perfect courtly kind of manners, okay, acting just right. Again, why is a prioress doing that? Doesn't make any sense. As for her sympathies and tender feelings, she was so charitably solicitous, she used to weep if she but saw a mouse, caught in a trap, if it were dead or bleeding. And she had little dogs she would be feeding, with roasted flesh or milk or fine white bread. And bitterly she wept if one were dead, or someone took a stick and made it smart. She was all sentiment and tender heart. Okay, so, oh man, what a great person, right? Here she is, cares about these animals. She has a lot of empathy, compassion for them. She's feeding them milk and bread. That's wonderful. You know who she's not showing compassion or empathy for? People. Okay, it doesn't say anything about that. Okay, so where she could be giving this milk and bread perhaps to someone who is hungry, okay, someone who is poor, She's giving it to animals instead. Her veil was gathered in a seemly way. Her nose was elegant, her eyes glass gray. Okay, so now we're getting a more physical description of her. And it says that her veil was gathered in a seemly way. Now, if you look at pictures of nuns, prioresses, etc., right, it's not very flattering the way that they had to wear their habits, their veils around their faces. Normally, it's like very tight, right? A lot of times their foreheads are covered in some of the pictures. So you're not seeing a lot of softness at all. You're not seeing their hair at all. Okay, so it's very harsh because physical appearance shouldn't really matter. Okay, but hers is worn very loosely around her face as to like kind of accentuate her best features. Her mouth was very small, but soft and red. Her forehead certainly was of fair spread, almost a span across the brows I own. Okay, so you can definitely see her forehead. A wide forehead in Chaucer's time was a sign of beauty, so she might have been like an attractive woman. It also tells us what color her lips are. Okay, and notice, what color does it say they are? Red. I don't really know anyone that naturally has red lips. Okay, so she's wearing lipstick. Number one, makeup wasn't common back then, and certainly not for nuns. So this nun is wearing red lipstick. Okay. I love red lipstick, it's great. But in literature, okay, if you're wearing red lipstick, okay, it normally means you might be a loose woman, perhaps. She was indeed by no means undergrown. Okay. So he can also see her figure. If you go back and look at pictures of what nuns wear, it's pretty loose. Okay, these robes that they wear are pretty loose. So this nun, I don't know if she's had her robe altered, if she's wearing a belt with it, but you can see the shape of her. Her cloak, I noticed, had a graceful charm. She wore a coral trinket on her arm, a set of beads the gaudies tricked in green, whence hung a golden brooch of brightest sheen, on which there first was graven a crowned A, and lower a more vignette amene. So she is wearing a rosary beads, okay, around her wrist of coral and green. Hanging from them is a gold A. Okay. And on that A, it has a saying that means love conquers all. Well, if I am a nun, I would have my, rosary, but I think I might have a cross on it, or perhaps like a Bible verse. I don't know if I'd have a saying that says, love conquers all. Okay. Now, she has people traveling with her as well. It tells us in those last two lines. Another nun, the secretary at her cell, was riding with her, and 3 priests as well. So who is she wearing this red lipstick for? Who is she trying to look nice for? I think it's the 3 priests that are with her. Okay. Are they her special friends?